Okay then. My judges are ready? And my timer? Yeah. Alright, then let's begin. In this final negative speech of today's debate round, we're going to be looking at a couple key voting issues. A couple reasons that I would ask you to vote against the affirmative team's plan. A couple reasons that the status quo is a much more beneficial option and the affirmative team's plan will ultimately fail to deliver the results they presented you with and will only bring about negative ramifications. So let's go to these voting issues, under which I'll be talking about the affirmative team's responses. The first voting issue is investors withdrawing. Investors withdrawing. Now, my partner brought up an interesting argument in his first speech, that investors are currently withdrawing from Russia because they don't want any part of the Russian economy. Never responded to by the affirmative team. It went through the 2AC and the 1AR going unresponded to by the affirmative team. That investors in the United States are currently withdrawing from Russia because they don't want to invest in the Russian economy. And it's much too late for the affirmative team to respond in their next speech. I ask you to disregard any new or content you haven't heard before in the next speech, given that would be abusive to the negative team, given we wouldn't be able to respond to it. If they could hold all the responses to the last speech, that would undermine debate. So the affirmative team completely dropped that investors are currently withdrawing from Russia. This means that no one is interested in the Russian economy, and a BIT is essentially useless, completely accepted by the affirmative team, and this alone is reason to vote against a bilateral investment treaty. Let's go to voting issue 2, that of a conflicting law. A conflicting law. Now, specifically, we're going to be looking at the World Trade Organization. Now, the affirmative team's only response was that it's talking about an investment guarantee, and the bilateral investment treaty somehow isn't an investment guarantee. Yes, it is. An investment guarantee simply refers to agreements that try to guarantee investments by giving protection. Bilateral investment treaty simply is an investment guarantee. That's the type of policy that it is. And the United States federal government has said that no investment guarantees can be done unless under free trade agreements, and free trade agreements can't be done unless Russia's in the WTO, which they aren't yet. So the affirmative ballot won't actually get you anything, given a bilateral investment treaty is impossible. Let's go to voting issue 3, which is that of Russian refusal. Russian refusal, and we'll be looking at a couple arguments under here. First off, let's look at the argument of the dollar. Now, the affirmative team's only response was that this was talking about trade, not investment. However, what the article said was that Russia doesn't want any part of the United States dollar for trade because of the economic risks it presents. This doesn't just talk about trade, it also applies to investment. Russia doesn't want any part of the United States dollar because of the economic risks that it presents. Russia doesn't want investment with the United States. Therefore, they won't ratify a bilateral investment treaty. They simply don't want investment with the United States of America. Going down, one of my partner's responses was dropped. That Medvedev said the protection thing was just a political purpose. This was dropped by the affirmative team, that it was just political posturing. That when Medvedev said he wanted clear protection for United States investors, it was just political posturing. That went completely unrefuted by the affirmative team in their last speech. And given the next speech is the last speech of the debate round, I ask you to disregard any responses against this point in that speech. So we've seen that Russia will not accept a BIT because first off, they don't want the risk associated with the United States economy they believe there are, which is evidence that has not been directly refuted specifically by the affirmative team. And secondly, that any protection that they've talked about is just political posturing. Russia does not want a BIT with the United States. They don't want investment in the United States economy. That is a fact. An affirmative ballot will not get you anything because Russia simply won't ratify it. Let's go down to the fourth and final voting issue, which is that of economic devastation. Economic devastation. Now let's look at what the affirmative team's responses were. They talked about, first off, how the piece of evidence talked about Russia and the world economy. My response is that we were talking simply about Russia. Yes, it mentioned Russia and the world economy. We were talking specifically about Russia, though, so that's the part of the evidence that we read. We're talking specifically about Russia, and the piece of evidence did actually specify Russia's economy right now. It was talking about Russia's banks with the financial bubble in Russia. Their second response was that we're already linked. Let's look back at the cross-examination. The affirmative team said, I asked them the question, if your plan worked, if a bilateral investment treaty did happen, would it increase investment in Russia? The answer the affirmative team provided you with was yes. Which means that if you vote for the affirmative plan, yes, we are currently linked a little bit in the status quo, but under the affirmative plan, they're attempting to link us a lot more. It is linked in the status quo, but it's linked a lot more under the affirmative plan. They can offer you no justification, no protection for this policy that links us further to the Russian economy and economic devastation. So we see that at the end of today's debate, the affirmative team's plan has no basis to be voted on. It simply won't work, isn't needed, and it will only bring economic devastation to the United States. And we've seen dropped points all over the flow by the affirmative team. So I ask you to vote against this plan that will not work and stick with the benefits of the status quo and a stable economy. Thank you.